Hello guys, I'm George Gonzalez and I'm obsessed with making games. Today I'm going to show you exactly what we're working on, which is the color picker, kind of like what Unity has for color picking. I will show you what it looks like. And I'm still in the works with some of this. Let me see, this is still not working correctly, but I'll show you the booth. Okay, so as you can see, I can scoot in closer so you can see. So this is the booth. So you can see that we have the different colors, and you'll notice that I can go in here and I can change that. And it doesn't change anything at first, but see, you have, I need to make sure I move out of the way. So if I want it blue, let me see, right there, and then move it around. So the thing that I might do to improve this is to separate them a little bit more so you don't accidentally move it to the other one. And then when you hit, let me see, what do I want? So it needs to be a little bit more robust. I'll check something out, see what I can do. And then when I hit save, again, it'll change to green. See? And then it will be network. So there's the problem in here is that I have my network hand that I need to remove. That's what's lagging behind. But I use that to debug it. So I'll show you exactly how we do this network version of the game and how you can implement it in your own game, regardless of how you decide to do it. Okay, so let me show you the code so you can dive in and do it yourself. And just so you guys know, if you want the code, like always, all the stuff is available in my community. If you want access to the code, that's for the paid members. And if you need help finishing your games, I do have daily accountability for free in my community. If you're willing to if you really want to finish your games and you're serious about making games, then you can join the community for free. And you can do that, but only if you're serious about it. Let's talk about the code. Let me get this moved over here. So what we have is if I put in picker in here, we have different picker scripts. Okay, so we have the hue picker, and then we have the SV, and you'll see that in the material. So let's say the color. See how Unity, when you have to pick a color, they have this wheel. This is for the hue. It's the same as ours. We could make it into circle. It doesn't matter. And then we have this, right? So you saw that we had all these things. And yes, we could do this instead, but this is kind of crazier, right? Because it moves both. So instead of doing all these crazy stuff or doing the hex, because sometimes like Gorilla Tag and stuff, sometimes you have the hex values. You don't need the hex values. You can just do it, eyeball it. I think that's better. So I'm going to show you how we did this. I don't even have a texture, so you don't need any images. You could have your own image to color pick. But let's go over the hue. So I'll show you the equipment. I'll show you the setup, the high overview of the equipment station and how it all works. Let me see. We'll put the scene here. And so what we have here, and as you notice, you didn't see this on the other one is because it didn't transfer through, but we'll figure it out later. So right now we have, turn this on. So we have our, why isn't it showing? Oh, because it's in the wrong. Okay, so here we have the SV setup, the square box. And you'll notice there's a square here. And this is the trigger that enables it. So I'll probably change it to this. So that way it's more at the bottom. So it doesn't go so far up. So that way you don't have to, so you have to actually touch it to enable it. So I think this will be better. And because you notice that when I move my hand, it would still accidentally track. And so we want it as close as possible so that it only activates when we're right there, okay? And let's see where we're at. So the hue, you notice this is a rectangle. We have a trigger that's in the hue picker. So we have tags for the picker, and then we have a UI layer. So the UI layer is basically detecting your finger UI, and I'll show you that setup in a second. But what happens is this trigger is detected, and then it turns on the picker, and we have the hue picker here. Again, you could do it in many ways. There's like 50 billion ways of doing this. This is how I chose to do it, and I'm going to show you. You could have done different layers and done the raycast per layer and stuff like that. It's up to you. But we have this render, and you see there's belt texture generator. So this generates the texture once when it spawns, and you can do like different width and height if you need to. If you want it to be like more detailed, but it's not needed. Okay, so this is pretty straightforward. It will do a render in this rectangle across, and that's all. And then the belt picker will actually select the color and change the color here. So we have in this equipment station color state. This has, and I'll move maybe my, whoops. Let me check. I gotta move my video a little bit. So what you see here is we have the hue. the saturation and the value, right? So we have the color value, saturation is how saturated it is. That's the square. So the square has two values. That's why it's a square. And then because we have the white, the black, and then the color on the other side. So the value and the saturation. Because we have a 0, 1, 0, 1, both ways. And this one is just one way. So the height doesn't really matter. It's mainly for the hue color. We have it from 0 to 1. Okay. And so we change that as we go. Let me move it back. Okay. And so that's all it is. And then for the player, let me show you the player. This is where it all starts. And yeah, let me save that. What happens with the player, there's still some stuff I'm trying to fix and change. But if we look at here we have a little, this is what we use for the UI. As you notice, it's a UI box. We use this for pressing buttons and whatnot. And now in here we have different detection pickers that I think, okay. So these are the detectors. They have a trigger as well, a box, and a rigid body with a kinematic. And then, so these are detections. And all they're doing is detecting for that button. And if the button's not there, it doesn't do anything. Okay, again, you could do it however you want. I just prefer to do this rather than have these Raycast always casting stuff. It's up to you. So I'm gonna start by showing you this script. Let me check. Okay, we're gonna just waiting for it to open up. And we have the hue belt. This is the Raycast. It should be detection. Okay. So the detection, all this is doing is on trigger enter, is the tag. Is checking the tag. Again, you can do this however you want. This is just enough for me. It's okay. It's not the big of a deal. It'll just check if it's that. If it's that, then it'll deactivate it on exit. It'll activate it on enter. And so this is to activate the Raycast, because the Raycast will start detecting to see what color you're picking. And so I don't want to detect colors if I'm not in that picker. And then, so for example, in this one, once it's activated, it'll have an update method that will constantly be doing a Raycast 0.1 distance. So it won't be so far. So it's not doing like a super long Raycast. So technically, like even if I have this on, it'll still work, right? Like it says, hey, am I hitting the hue picker? If I'm not, because again, and this is not all, because you still have to, there might be other things you're hitting, like the collider, the box collider. So I have to check, hey, did I actually hit something that has this component? Again, things could go different. Like for example, I could have changed this to detecting by layer. And so that way it would trigger only in a certain layer and then do the hue picker. And then I wouldn't have to do this check because only one item has a hue, has this hue picker tag. But right now we have two objects with that tag. Okay, so that's why we have to do this. But again, this is while you're the equipment station, which is not so heavy. So it's okay if all these operations are happening when you're picking an item. Okay, and because and then the Raycast will set hit and tell you, okay, where did I hit in that texture in the diagram? Okay, it'll give you an X coordinate. And again, like we said, the hue only needs one coordinate, the X, because that tells you what color it chose. And so we just do that because this is for me the best way to pass the coordinates of what I did. So that way the equipment station has all the information it needs to select the color. And then the hit, this is the hue belt picker. So now we're in the equipment station. In there, let me show you where we're at. Okay, so this is the setup for the finger. We have a script that detects the picker, and then we have the Raycast that is enabled when it detects. And that Raycast will send the information to the appropriate class. Okay, so that's how we bridge the two, because this guy doesn't know any about the color you chose. The only thing it knows is what it hit on that image. It doesn't even know the color yet, but it gives you the location of where it hit. And that's what we're carrying across. And again, you could do this in multiple ways. This is how I decided to do it. So I don't have any color information in the player at all. Okay, so we go back, discard, and again we go to the equipment station, which again I need to separate a little bit more. But essentially, maybe what we'll do is let me say save button, and then maybe we can go in here. Oh, it won't. Oh, because of the image thing. Okay, because it's a. Let me check. It's a canvas. It's a world space. Okay, it's just because it's weird. Okay, there we go. So now we could do the save up here so we don't run into it. I don't know, it doesn't really matter much. We'll change things as we go. But that way we can have more flexibility because it felt kind of weird going between one and the other. Okay, so these, you don't need to look at them now. If you wanted to add a texture here, you could, right? I have an unlit texture for generic, and then I have one for the cursor. So these cursors that are yellow. And then what happens is for this generic, we have I think this is different. It should be for this one. Hue, we have the hue, and then we have the SV for the saturation and value. See, it has a generic one. So this one is like unlit SV matte. I don't know, you can call it whatever you want. This one's the same, unlit hue matte, so that you know which one's which. But the thing is, the game will create the texture for it at runtime. So let me show you that first. So this is the render, there's the mesh, the collider. And the reason we need this mesh collider, because this is how it can detect the hit, okay? So we have the belt generator, the texture. Let's go into that first. So for the belt, it has the width, and basically on awake, it'll just do the texture based on the hue, and it'll just do that. And then it'll say, hey, add the texture to this material. Texture.apply. You can pause it, you can have it. If you want the script, again, I have it for my paid members, my community. And let's see, so you can, and then we have the belt picker. So again, this is now saying, okay, we have the hue value. It's the X coordinate. So we have the color state. The hue is the value clamped at that X value. That's all we need. Okay. And then it knows which, that's the hue, because I only need from 0 to 1. And the renderer in here doesn't need anything, because this is just an image, because it already knows that from 0 to 1 what those values are. And I'll show you in a second. So if we go to hue, see how in here we have the hue as a 0 to 1. Most of the stuff happens in the hit here. See, like we have the actual hit transform. This is pretty straightforward. There's not much to do, okay? Because it's linear, okay? So we have that. And so we have the picker and the render. And as you can see, this is all under this tag. The cursor, now this is where we have to do a little bit more. The cursor only updates based on the information given, okay? So when this changes, the color changes, the cursor moves. So the cursor doesn't move where your finger is, which you could do that. The thing is that you could do that. The reason I did it this way is because I wanted to make sure that it's kind of like a debug, a visual debug of what's happening. So if I pick green, I wanted the cursor to go where the green is. And so that in the right to left, it will do that. And I don't know if it'll do up and down base, but in here, you could see the local X. And then the surface offset is the Y, because it was rotated a weird way. So look, so this also depends on you. So this is where things get different if your game is different. In my scenario, as you can see, these values are based on the scale. So again, like the local X, if you scale your mesh render, then these values will be different depending on the scale. If you do a 2D game versus a 3D game, these changes. You gotta understand that for example, the good thing about this is that it all works. It doesn't matter how this is rotated. So like, let's say this was rotated this way, right? It would still work. If this is scaled differently like this, then maybe I would need to like change the -5 to 5. Because the idea, let me see. So if I go like this, let me see if I go -5. Let's see if I do 5. See, it's still the edge because of the way. I think the -5 to 5 is fine as long as you use the same setup, because these are regular planes that I scaled. And the reason why this works, because the cursor is a child of the object, okay? So we're running this in local space. This is one of the tricks that we did. And I say we as me and Bezzy. I use Bezzy to help me out with most of this code. Most of the code is AI, but I had to kind of like help it because it wasn't really understanding what it needed to do. But anyway, so this was like the biggest thing, the cursor, because it had to be precise. And it wasn't just getting it. And so that was this code had to do like, what's the offset? And this offset depends on see how like you have to go in here, go to local, make sure, because if I did global, see how this is a weird thing. How does it know where to go? It's like, it's a weird. So if you do a local space, then you have the 3 axes. You have the X. So you have the X, the Z, and the Y. So if your object, for some reason, you exported it and it's differently, see how it like goes wonky. But let's say you have a different object. See, in my scenario, this will always be Y up, regardless of the offset. But if you set it up differently and you see that this mesh has a different rotation locally, then you have to account for that in this script, right? So this is where you're like, okay, what the picker is at the X value that you're getting. Where are you getting the X value from? And if you go in here, the cursor is the biggest one because this is dependent on where it is. And so, for example, the cursor's local position is the local, that's what it's moving left to right. The rest is 0 and surface offset because we don't need anything. Like when you pick a color, it doesn't matter if it's up or down. Like, so there's no point in doing that. So it will move right or left. You could do this for like a slider if you want to as well, where it detects the slider and gives you a value. So that way, the player doesn't need to go up and down. So, but these values depend on your local position. So be aware of that, like which way the X is facing, which way the Y, and do you need to offset it, right? In this scenario, if it was reversed, I would do this, negative to positive. But in our scenario, if you do 5, it goes left, and if it goes -5, it goes to the other way. So that's why this is like this. The lerp goes from positive to negative, because that's the way it's set up. So I just want to make sure you understand some of these things, because you can copy the same code and it might not work for you because of this setup. Okay, so you have to be aware of that. But this setup is nice because it takes into account, like I just grabbed a plane, a default plane from Unity, and I scaled it. I put the cursor underneath. I just put a mesh render, that's color. Do you see a color in here? Let me click on it. You'll see, and it's a base material. I just grab whatever material. And then that is everything. Okay, so we have that. Now, let me give you the SV, the saturation and value, because this one's a little bit, it's the same concept, it's just with 2 values, right? So we have the trigger collider, the same as always. This is what the finger detects. So these 2 things collide with the collider, and it enables the picker, the Raycast. Okay, and it will point to wherever you are. And this time, the cursor we need the X and the Z. Okay, so but the render is the same. I'm going to show you the picker is the same. We saw that, but the texture generator is a little bit different. So we have the size. And this time, the other thing, if you notice, is that we have to update the hue. When we change the top color, this square needs to change to update. So what are we doing? Okay, so first we get everything and we generate things. So all of it generates everything it needs to, and it sets things appropriately, because we might already have a color saved before this. Okay, so last hue, the color state, we have the hue color from our HSV to RGB. So again, this is from the color. And the color state has the hue, and the value is 1, 1. And so by default, that's what it is. And then depending on what it is, we're lerping between white and black, because those are the 2 values. So we have the 0, 1 and the 0 to 1 with the color. And then we set the pixel, and we apply it. So this is like, it's always regenerating based on the color of the hue. Now, a better, more performant thing would be to not do it on update. So for example, we could say we can regenerate on awake, that's for sure, based on the textures. We do like in here, like I think the player, let me see the local state player first. We have the blue start. So first we initialize this from the hex. Okay, hex value. Base color, and so local player main hex. So this should be on awake, like this, and then the other here should be on start. So that way, this is just like a technicality, right? So that way, this will be ready by the time. So the hue color will be updated before we do this. And then instead of doing, so that's one thing, the order of operation. That's just like a small detail. And then the second thing, instead of doing the update, if you want it to be more performant, you could say. You can have on the hue, let me show you, in the color state in here, you can have a function that says Unity event, and then on color change. Okay, and the Unity event in this, we need to import missing references, which is in here, the Unity events. Okay, so anytime we, let me see, initialize, save color, anytime we update the color, hex color utility, we need to say, like in here, we just need to constantly update color. So instead of not update, sorry, we have a public void update color, and it brings in color or base color, I don't know, like, so we could do it here, or anytime this changes, we can also in here say on color. Oh, whoopsie. So this right here needs to be added, but we could add it in here so that anytime we change this, we are also updating it to be on color change, right? Dot invoke. We could do something like that. Let me see, why is it complaining? But you can add in here like a different way to update the color. So you could add it here, update color, and then when you go back in here, or let's do it now. Let me see, or maybe we could do this on color change. Okay, and it'll trigger that whenever it needs to. And then if we go back to here, we can say, hey, let's see, color state on color change, the add listener and we could add regenerate. Okay. And then on destroy, we would remove that color state, and you can just remove everything. It doesn't really need, because you would do this for both. No, you don't need it for the other one. On color change dot remove, we can just remove all listeners, or you could just remove listener, and you can just do that. Okay, so if you do this, every time it changes, it'll just update once, right? Instead of right now, the way it's set up is that you will always update it regardless. So this is kind of like a lazy, nice way of doing it. If you want it to be more precise, you could do that. Does that make sense? Hopefully this makes sense. Like how many times you're executing on a call, like you don't need this, like it's redundant. Like, and one thing that I want to give you as a tip is oftentimes you won't see a difference. Like if the changes will not make a difference visually, right? But these things add up, and it's not that you have to do it all the time, but there's easy wins. And this is one where if you get used to doing things on update and checking, instead of adding listeners or event-driven things where you're just waiting for the event to happen, those are very better. Anytime you can do that, it'll save you time. It'll save you efficiency, and it's just good practice. And so just because you can do it doesn't mean you should. Especially if you're in a VR game, in Unreal and stuff, you want to save as much memory as you can. Obviously, you're not going to be like pinching pennies and like to save everything, but it's often nice to get used to that setup. Does that make sense? So you're not always doing this kind of thing, and you're doing more stuff like this, where you're waiting for an event. Okay. That's just a tip, and I'll change it eventually. But right now, because I wanted to get it done, honestly, like performance doesn't matter at the beginning. You're just trying to get things done. But now that it works and you saw it working, I can polish and improve on it. Okay, so you saw the texture generator. The picker is the same as before. You have the hit, but this time we're doing X and Y value. We have the saturation for the Y. That's the saturation, and then the color value from 0. Like, is it white or black? Like, let me see. I think it's, sometimes it's just like it hit the texture coordinate X, because again, the plane, the mesh, I guess the mesh collider, you need the mesh collider. If it's not detecting anything, it's because it's either not a mesh or it's not in the right layer. Like you can add a layer here in the Raycast to only hit that layer too. So you could do that instead of doing all these tags if you wanted. Anyway, so I have these again, SV pickers for saturation and value, and then we check that, and that's what we do. That's how easy it is. Okay. And then again, we update the color state. And in here, I'll show you, we have the cursor. This is the last thing you will need, is the cursor. Okay, because this is, again, what is very specific to the orientation of the mesh. And so again, if you copy it, but we have the 5 to 5 rule because that's a default plane. If you make your own, if you make like a circle or a ring, then you have to change the script to know where you're at in the circle. That makes sense. So then at that point, you can do, when you do the Raycast, you can just put the cursor where you're actually hitting it with your finger, and then you don't have to do this stuff, if that makes sense. So on trigger hit, you already have the location, so you can do a world location of where you're at. Okay, let me see. So we have in here, we say, okay, depending on where we are in the saturation, we want to show that. So that's why I said this is really good for me, because I need to be able to understand that the value I am getting is correct visually with what I'm seeing. Okay, and then we have the local position, which is, again, see, we have the local X and the local Z. Okay, local X is the saturation, local Z, because Z is the up and down, is the value. And then the saturation offset, which is super different in what we saw. But the offset is just the Y, because again, these dependent on how your mesh is set up. Again, if you want any help, I have a community and game devs to help you, but that is it. That is everything. Like you saw the setup, I have the renders, the mesh, the collider. You have the 3 materials, one for the cursor, and then one for each one, and for the SV picker and the hue, and they are generated once. The generation, as you can see, is on start. So anytime you spawn it, that's when it generates. If you wanted something that you just do it once, you can color the texture and put it in as a sampler. But this is perfect because it already knows what the format is for the value, and so there's already, like, the coordinates are from 0 to 1, so it doesn't matter. If you had an image of your own, you'd have to figure out what color is at that pixel and get that pixel and whatnot. And so this makes things so much easier. And again, like, we don't need to like update it constantly. We can just wait to generate this, because this is also doing that regeneration with the SD value. Again, like I told you, we could do different things to make sure that we're only updating this when the color changes instead of all the time. And hopefully you like this. In the next few videos, I'll always do, next Monday we'll have Multiplayer Monday, and whatever questions you have, let me know. We'll see you next video.